what if I told you that the very policies designed to make our schools fairer are actually making them more unequal? It sounds completely backward, I know. But today, we're diving into a really compelling argument that some well-intentioned ideas in education might be creating a new kind of trap for social mobility. So yeah, this is the central paradox we're exploring today. The idea that policies created in the name of fairness could be having the exact opposite effect. You're probably thinking, how on earth could that even happen? Well, let's break it down. To really get to the heart of this argument, we first need to look at two big ideas, two core pillars of modern liberalism, and see how they're being applied to education policy, not just here, but all over the world. Okay, so the analysis points to these two huge trends. First, you've got this really strong focus on expanding student rights, which in practice often means limiting a school's traditional disciplinary options. And second, you have this massive expansion of school choice, which basically brings free market ideas into the world of education. Now, these two things don't exist in separate bubbles. The real kicker is what happens when they collide. All right, so let's tackle that first trend, this expansion of student rights. And look, on the surface, who could possibly argue with that? It sounds fantastic. But we need to look closer at how it directly impacts a school's actual day-to-day ability to manage a classroom. And to understand the motivation here, you just have to look at this number, 1.2 billion. According to the World Health Organization, that's how many kids around the world face corporal punishment. I mean, that's a staggering, almost unimaginable number. And it has, quite rightly, fueled this powerful moral pushback, driving huge policy changes designed to protect students. And listen, this isn't just some academic theory, right? This is policy in action. We see it everywhere, from Taiwan banning corporal punishment completely to its steady decline in the United States. The trend is crystal clear. The old-school disciplinary playbook is being rewritten, fundamentally. So here is the absolute bottom line of this first point. As these policies take away traditional forms of discipline, public schools are left with a smaller and smaller management toolbox. And if you don't replace those old tools with new, effective, and, this is key, well-funded alternatives, the job of just keeping a classroom in order gets a whole lot harder. Okay, so that's one piece of the puzzle. Now, let's bring in the second major policy trend and see how it fits in, the incredible rise of school choice. I mean, on the face of it, what could be better than giving parents more freedom to pick the absolute best school for their kid? And we're not talking about some small, niche trend here. This is a global explosion. The data from the OECD is pretty clear. From charter schools to voucher programs, we've seen a massive expansion in choice. Families have more freedom than they've ever had. But, and this is a big but, every choice has a consequence. And here's the catch. This is where those two big policies we talked about really start to clash. The analysis shows a pretty serious downside. While the promise of choice is more opportunity for everyone, the reality, according to a lot of research, is actually more segregation. When families with the time, money, and resources are free to choose, they often choose to leave the public system, which concentrates the students with the greatest needs into the very schools that now have the fewest tools to help them. So you see what's happening? You put these two things together, weakened management tools in public schools, and an easy exit for families with means, and you get what the source calls a vicious cycle. One that doesn't just reflect inequality, but actively creates and raises class barriers. This, right here, lays out the whole mechanism perfectly. Let's walk through it. Step 1, you limit the disciplinary tools in public schools. Step 2, this makes it harder and more expensive to maintain an orderly learning environment. That leads directly to Step 3, families who can afford it use school choice to opt out and find schools they see as more stable. And the final result? The public schools they leave behind have more challenges, fewer resources, and become increasingly stratified. It's a cycle that literally feeds itself. And let's be honest, from a parent's point of view, this makes total sense. You can't really blame them. When you ask parents what they're looking for, things like school discipline and a safe, orderly environment are always right up there with academics. And in this new landscape, they're increasingly finding what they're looking for in private or charter schools. Okay, so that's the diagnosis, and it sounds pretty grim, I'll admit. So what's the solution? Is there a way out of this trap? How do we find a balance between these two really important values? Freedom for students and families, and genuine equity for all. Now, it's really, really important to get this next part right. The argument here is not to turn back the clock. It's not about getting rid of student rights or ending school choice. It's about being smart enough to recognize the unintended consequences and asking how we can design these policies better to stop these negative side effects from happening.
So the analysis suggests a few common sense corrections. First, if you're going to take away the old disciplinary tools, you absolutely must pour money into the new ones. That means more counselors, more behavioral support, the whole shebang. Second, you have to design school choice systems with fairness baked right in. But maybe most importantly, you have to reinvest in our public schools so they can actually compete. And finally, none of this happens in a vacuum. We have to talk about it. We need to make sure the public, especially young people, understand the real-world consequences so we can build support to fix it.
So in the end, this whole analysis leaves us with a huge critical question. This isn't a simple choice between freedom on one side and fairness on the other. The real challenge, the real test, is whether we can build a system that delivers both. How do we protect our kids' rights without accidentally building a two-tiered system that leaves so many behind? That is the trap we have to figure our way out of.